afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. It is officially 12:10 on this beautiful day in April as I look out my office window and see that it is officially snowing in Altoona on April 21st. Gotta love Pennsylvania. Gotta love it. Okay, so today we are going to be looking at victimization in the minority communities. Now, we are going to focus specifically on sexual assault victimization in minority communities as it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Of course, the PowerPoint and handout is available for you in the handout section. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the question section. I will answer them as we go. Let's hope we have no technical difficulties like last time. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So of course, my name is Thad Graham. I am the education specialist here with Family Services Incorporated, specifically the Victim Services Program. Our mission here at Family Services is to provide resources to build healthier relationships and provide and promote personal growth. Of course, our vision is to engage with communities to meet the needs of their most vulnerable members. And of course, a trigger warning here just to let you know that we are going to be talking about sexual assault. Now, nothing's too specific, but please make sure you are taking care of yourself. It can be a triggering subject for many. So please make sure you are taking your own health and own well-being into account above everything else. And as always, we are going to be talking about sexual assault. Whenever we hear the term sexual assault, we immediately jump to and think about rape. That is the first thing that we think of when we hear the term sexual assault. It is important to understand that when we talk about sexual assault or sexual victimization or sexual violence, we are not just talking about rape. We are, of course, talking about a multitude of other things as well. Unwanted sexual touch, unwanted physical touch, invasion of your personal space. It is more than just rape. Now, to get us started here, we need to understand that there is not one type of person, no gender, no race, no ability, no socioeconomic class or education level, no population in any part of the world that is not affected by sexual violence. Sexual violence affects everybody. There is no specific, this person is going to be a victim of sexual violence. There is no way to know specifically, there is no way to classify and say these people are going to experience sexual violence. There is no perfect victim. Anybody can be a victim. It comes down to opportunity, and it comes down to someone wanting to or having the need to hold power or control over another individual, or the wish to use their own vulnerabilities or their own risk against them. That being said, today we are focusing on victimization in minority communities. So what is the problem? What are we looking at here? A survey conducted by the Department of Justice statistics revealed that the numbers of sexual assault victims in low-income, racial, and ethnic minority, as well as homosexual or transgender communities, are disproportionately higher than wealthy, white, or heterosexual problems. No matter what minority we look at, whether it's ethnic, whether it's racial, whether we're looking at sexual identity, anyone who identifies or is identified in that ethnic or racial minority group is at a higher risk for victimization than a wealthy, white, or heterosexual population. Oftentimes in low-income communities, sexual assault is 12 times more prevalent than in wealthy areas. Not only that, victims are less likely to report. Now, there are multiple different factors that come into play here. Oftentimes, when we look at these lower income communities and people who are being sexually assaulted and they're not reporting, it can often be linked back to, or we see many cases where they're being victimized by someone who holds power over them, a boss, or someone that is able to hold not only their ability to have income and provide for their family, but someone that holds power over them and feels that they are almost less of a person. They are less likely to report. They are less likely to cause problems for them. They're not likely to be noticed. The National Crime Information Center reported that when we look at Native Americans, 56% of Native American women experience sexual violence in their lifetime. Now, 9 out of 10 times, 90% of the time, they are going to be assaulted by a non-Native individual. So over half of Native American women in the United States are going to experience some sort of sexual violence. 90% of the time, it's going to be someone who is a non-Native individual. When we look at Asian and Pacific Islander women, Asian and Pacific Islander women are at a higher risk of being victims of sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and sexual exploitation. Hispanic survivors often experience sexual violence in intimate partner relationships. 35% experience some sort of sexual violence in their lifetime, and unfortunately, a large majority of that is from an intimate partner, is from husband, boyfriend, girlfriend. It's from that person that is supposed to love and protect them. The Institute for Women's Policy research reports that more than 20% of Black women are raped during their lifetime. This is, of course, a higher rate than any other class of women overall. Black women were also 2.5 times more likely to be murdered by men than their white counterparts. And 9 in 10 Black females knew their killers. That means a majority of these women were murdered by most likely an intimate partner, someone that they knew, they loved, they trusted. Black women also experience significantly higher rates of psychological abuse, including humiliation, insults, name calling, and coercive control than any other class of women. Now, looking specifically at sexual violence, the numbers do not get any better for the Black population. The National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black community reports that 40% of confirmed sex trafficking survivors in the United States are Black. 4 out of every 10 confirmed sex trafficking survivors or victims in the United States are Black. That's a substantially large population. When we look at high school students, 11% of Black girls in national high school samples reported being raped. Black girls and women 12 years and older experience higher rates of rape and sexual assaults than any other class of women. And 38% of Black women experienced sexual violence other than rape during their lifetime. And this, of course, is in the United States. Unfortunately, those numbers don't get any better. The one that stands out to me, I have bolded here. For every Black woman that reports sexual violence, there are 15 that do not. Think about that. For every one Black woman that reports that she is sexually assaulted, that she is raped, that she has been sexually violated, there are 15 women who are not reporting. 15 survivors that are not seeking help, 15 survivors who are not being given the opportunity to get in front of the person that victimized them and try to get justice. 60% of Black females have experienced some form of sexual abuse before the age of 18. 1 in 4 Black girls will be sexually abused before the age of 18, and 1 in 5 Black women are survivors of rape. 1 in 5. And those are just reported numbers. Remember, there are 15 that do not report. For every one that reports, there are 15 Black women that do not report, that can't be counted. 35% of Black women experience some form of contact sexual violence during their lifetime. 17% of Black women experienced sexual violence other than rape by an intimate partner during their lifetime. 30% of Black women with documented histories of childhood sexual abuse were sexually assaulted again in adulthood. 30%. It's almost 1 in 3 Black women that have been abused as a child sexually are going to be re-victimized again as adults. The other one that stands out is 17% of Black women are going to be sexually assaulted by an intimate partner during their lifetime. And that's not including numbers who are going to be raped by their intimate partner. Those numbers are really eye-opening. What are these victims going through? Victims with a non-English speaking background can be impacted by a lack of cultural and linguistically competent programs and services, which further hinders protections and support. Oftentimes, we look at our communities, especially something like Blair County, and we do not see the number of different languages and the number of different non-English speaking people that live and work in this community. It is something that we need to be vigilant of and need to do a better job supporting them and providing resources to allow them to come forward. And then once they do come forward with those reports, to be able to get the support and services they need in a meaningful and respectful way. Survivors of color are often stereotyped. These stereotypes perpetuate the notion that survivors of color are often willing participants in their own victimization. This often is a result of implicit bias. Now, in case you don't know, I did define it here for you. Implicit bias is defined as a preference for or prejudice against a person or a group of people. Now, these are not something that we often control. We all carry a different form of bias with us. We're often not aware we have them, and they often will determine how we deal or interact with different types of people. Our biases are triggered automatically through the rapid association of people, groups, and objects, and our attitudes and stereotypes about them. We all have implicit bias in some way, shape, or form. It is important that we understand and identify that and work to overcome it. One of my favorite examples of implicit bias in overcoming that is one of my favorite movies of all times, Men in Black, the original. Not what they did with the reboot, but the original Men in Black, starring Will Smith from the 90s. During his training to become a man in black, this person who's dealing with aliens. Him and a bunch of other recruits are put in a room where they're giving little to no information, they're giving weapons, and they are then bombarded with images, cardboard cutouts of these aliens. All of the other individuals begin firing at these aliens without care, except for the main character, except for Will Smith. He is able to overcome his implicit bias of this other group and actually identify them for who they truly are and what they're truly doing. It's a great example. I do suggest you look that up on YouTube. So what are the barriers to reporting? What are some barriers that prevent these groups from reporting? Unfortunately, prejudice and racist stereotypes can negatively affect the response process to sexual abuse within ethnic minorities and effectively discourage victims and survivors from reporting. Also, ethnic minorities may experience disadvantaged treatment from medical professionals who might be prejudiced or perpetuate hateful stereotypes based on ethnicity or race of the victim. Also, they could be dealing with a stigma or shame that often prevents victims of child sexual abuse and other sexual abuse from speaking up or seeking treatment. The stigma varies within ethnic minority communities, but it is there, and it will and does make sexual assault victims more vulnerable and more reluctant to come forward. I was able to watch a wonderful webinar talking about sexual assault in the Black communities and talking about how often Black churches can be a barrier to reporting, where people feel shamed about being victimized, or they feel like they need to be a strong individual and perpetuate that strength to everybody. Also, male survivors. Oftentimes, male survivors will feel stigma and shame, especially when dealing in minority communities. Sexual assault can have a serious impact on a survivor's sense of identity and belonging within their community. Some communities that have stricter guidelines, that have stricter beliefs, can often exclude children or other victims from their community or even their family. This strengthens that stigma of silence and impacts the support for and the need of support for these victims. I said about male victims earlier, and often when we look at ethnic minorities and minority communities, unfortunately, responses are gendered. Male participants often feel discouraged or less able to talk about their experiences. Female participants are often pointed out as having a stigma around them. Looking at some communities like the Asian Pacific community and other more conservative communities, they look at this affecting their marriage prospects. Will they be able to marry? Will they be able to marry a respectable person? Will they be respectable? And of course, unfortunately, certain institutions and minority relationships within those institutions often are off-putting, and due to negative experiences, they often do not want to come forward. They do not want to deal with the police or social workers or child and youth or even victim service programs. We as service providers need to be able to help victims understand that even if they've had a previous experience that has been negative in their eyes, whether it is with themselves or family members, that we are here to help them. We believe them, and we are not going to allow our implicit bias or any other barriers to prevent us from servicing and helping these victims to the fullest of our ability. And that brings us to what we can do. We need to, of course, educate ourselves. We cannot help unless we understand. The information I provided here today is a great start, but it is by no means the end-all be-all. One of the most important things that we can do is to educate ourselves on issues of sexual violence for these minority groups. What they experienced in the past, what they are experiencing now, and what can they expect in the future. Overcoming our own implicit bias, overcoming and understanding barriers to coming forward, providing resources or understanding to allow individuals to overcome those barriers is one of the best ways that we can help victims in minority communities. Allowing them to understand that it is okay to come forward, to ask for help, and to get resources. To understand that just because someone doesn't speak English as their first language, that programs like ours and other programs will provide interpreters for them to help them, get the assistance they need to get the justice that they deserve. Of course, as always, FSI Victim Services is here to help with victims in minority communities, with non-English speaking victims. When looking at sexual assault victims, we do have resources when it comes to overcoming those language barriers that we can provide to victims to help them with resources and to help them get the justice that they deserve. Of course, our helpline, 814-944-3585, even non-English speaking victims can call or text that number, and we have the resources available to assist them and help them. That is not something that should be a barrier to getting help. Of course, that number is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Of course, you can find us on social media. If you would like to watch another webinar again, if maybe you were unable to attend, of course, all of our webinars can be found on our go-to stage, as well as our YouTube channel under Family Services Incorporated. All of our videos can be found there, they can be shared, they can be watched. If you have questions about previous trainings or previous videos, please feel free to reach out to myself. Of course, my information is always at the end. Our last webinar for Sexual Assault Awareness Month is going to be sexual assault in the LGBTQ+ community. We are going to be looking specifically at this minority group. Our helpline advocate, Brittany Cervello, is going to be our guest presenter again. It is going to be a great webinar. Please, these are actually filling up quickly. So if you're not registered, please do it now. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the question section. I will, of course, hang out and answer any questions. If you would like more information on understanding sexual assault or improving your sexual assault response within special populations, minority communities, the Forensic Technology Center for Excellence, it's a program of the National Institute of Justice, has a lot of great resources. They have pre-recorded webinars that are hours of resources that go into even more depth and explain into great length about what these victims are going through, and can provide a great resource to further your understanding so that you can better help victims. Once again, my information, as always, the other resources are provided as well. If you do not have any other questions, I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay warm out there in the end of April. Thank you all for your time. Have a wonderful day.